much.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us today. We welcome you all on behalf of UNU-CRIS and UNU-MERIT, co-chairs of this session, and also all our contributing and collaborating partners. The UN Water Conference 2023 has given us this opportunity to organize this virtual side event on this topic of accelerating circular economy-based solution to support SDG 6 implementation in the Latin American region. Today, we are very grateful to all our panelists for representing not just different regions, but also different thematic expertise and skills, right from academia, private sector, UN agencies, think tanks from Latin America, and also experts from other parts of the world who will contribute to the discourse on best practices. And before further ado, I would like to hand over to my colleague Sane Okamoto, who will walk us through the structure of this session.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. I'm Sane Okamoto, researcher at the United Nations University, Maastricht Economic and Social Research Institute on Innovation and Technology. This session aims to bring effort towards strengthening circularity in the water-intensive industry and water management to address an integrated manner with practical and scalable solutions that can accelerate SDG 6 implementation. We call for a collective action to circular economy water agenda in the Latin American region to create a coalition to consolidate circular economy focused advances and innovation. This session will be moderated by my colleague Nidhi Nagabhatla, Senior Research Fellow at the UNU Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies, and be opened by an opening keynote speech by the Director of UNU-CRIS, Professor Philippe de Lombaerde. Then we will have a panel session with the flash talks by the 10 esteemed panelists and then continue to the open discussion. Please also feel free to provide your comments or questions in the chat function so we can discuss these during the open discussion later. For the first part of the panel session, we are delighted to have 4 esteemed researchers who will share their valuable insights from academic angles. Paula from Bolivia, Brenda from Mexico, Tamara from Finland, Martin from Japan. And then we would like to welcome the esteemed global expert who will showcase the best practices, and also we will have a valuable viewpoint from the policy. Maria from Inter-American Development Bank, Eric from Brazil, Manuel and Juan Pablo from Uruguay, Carlo from UNU-MERIT. Then we have a final set of the distinguished panelists from private sectors who are specialized in engineering, technology, and water management from Europe and Asia. Lucy from IMDC from Belgium, and Jun Wen Chen from Dintai from Taiwan. Over to you, Nidhi.
Thank you so much, Sane. And we have 2 at least keywords to position our discussion today. Water, which is a precious resource, a crucial resource for people, for livelihoods, for industries, and well-being of all species. And we have circular economy, an emerging pathway. And I would like to take this opportunity to have some words, opening words from our director, Dr. Philippe de Lombaerde, to please kickstart the session.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. Hello to all of you, panelists, and also all the people who are following us online. Buenos días especialmente para todas las personas que nos siguen desde América Latina. I would like to welcome you, first of all, on behalf of UNU-CRIS, UNU-MERIT, also UNU-IAS, because this is a good example of collaboration among UNU institutes. So I'm very happy for that. When we think about the economy, when we rethink the economy, and if when we think about how to align the economy with sustainable development, circularity is obviously a key ingredient. Circularity refers to the minimization of waste on the one hand, as you all know, and it refers to the use, the reuse, the maximization of the use of finite resources. Circularity obviously also applies to water as a resource, and therefore is connected to SDG 6 and the efficient use of water as a resource in different contexts, socioeconomic contexts. Now, the aim of this side event that we are very happy to co-organize is indeed to discuss the acceleration of circular economy-based solutions in a Latin American context. Now, what do we need for this? What do we need for this acceleration? I think on the supply side, and sorry for the wording because I'm an economist, on the supply side, I think we need solutions. We need new technical solutions that are related to the water infrastructure and how it is designed, how the water system is organized. It refers to technical solutions with respect to wastewater treatment, how to better extract from wastewater, for example, energy, nutrients, and how to better reuse the water as drinking water or for other uses. We need research and development to arrive at these new technical solutions, and we also need new partnerships, new engagements, new collaborations among the players within that system, among businesses, and so on. On the demand side, we also need changes in behavior. I already referred to the industrial users that will have to diversify their sourcing of resources. Outputs of certain activities become inputs for other activities. But you also have obviously the final consumers or the citizens and how they use water rationally, how they reuse water and so on, which can be obtained through awareness raising, education, and so on. So I think you need all these different components in place, and what makes it happen is then, of course, what you could call the governance of all this. Governance involving a multitude of actors, but where the public sector plays also a very different role, a crucial role, where the public sector will also have to mobilize all its instruments, from strategic planning over designing new regulatory frameworks, policy coordination, but then also the use of very specific instruments in the form of subsidies, in the form of fiscal incentives, and so on. The final, I think, element here is context. Context is crucial to when you look at the feasibility of solutions and new solutions. Context, which in this case means the Latin American context and then local context. Context determines to a large extent how water is looked at, how water is used. The socio-cultural context incides to a great extent in this. Also, context also will indicate to what extent or which institutions can be mobilized in specific cases. So this is, I think, the broad picture that we have here before us. This is a flash keynote, so I will make it short. I'm very much looking forward to hearing all of you. I'm very happy that we have managed to bring all these experts around our virtual table. So very happy and looking forward to hearing all of you, and wishing you all a very fruitful session. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Philippe, and thanks for setting the scene and emphasizing on the relevance of regulations and governance. that comes as a natural next step after innovation technologies are put in place. Well, once again, I'm your moderator for this session today. We have a huge panel in front of us to receive insights, to understand gaps and needs. And my name is Nidhi Nagabhatla once again, and I'm a senior research fellow here at UNU-CRIS, also the cluster coordinator for natural resource management, climate change, and health. And with that responsibility, I also work on the circular economy in the water sector at regional scale. I had the opportunity to collaborate with two bright researchers from Latin America in previous years. And I will request them to give a joint presentation. Professor Paula Soto-Rios at Mayor de San Andres University in Bolivia, and Professor Brenda Acevedo Suarez, research professor at Guadalajara University, Mexico. I'm sorry for my wrong pronunciation, but the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, greetings from Bolivia, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank Dr. Nidhi Nagabhatla for inviting us to this session. We have been working together for a very long time. And of course, UNU-CRIS and UNU-MERIT for holding this virtual side event. My name is Cecilia Soto, and I belong to the Mayor de San Andres University in Bolivia. I would like to start with this graph. As you can see, since 2000, the countries in Latin America region have contemplated the challenges and outlining practices, strategies, and regulations for the transition to circular economy. For us, as researchers, we understood that it's important to conduct a review of the existing circular economy in different countries, as all these documents have served us to articulate how circularity strategies are currently in our region. You can see it from the graph that it's mainly focused on waste, and the policy towards circular economy has lasted almost 2 decades. This is focusing only on waste. We hope that we could accelerate this for the wastewater treatment. In the sense of this, there are many studies that have been held in the Latin America region. In fact, from this figure, you can see an evolution of the scientific publications in the last 5 years on the topic of wastewater on regard of circular economy. And therefore, we realized that it was very important to publish a regional review of water circular economy in our region. There are four actions that we can take into account when we were doing this review. We didn't take only the scientific research, but we also focus on reports and also some policies in different countries. And 4 actions have been decided to be taken in Latin American region. One of them is the planned wastewater within the river basin, which has been undergoing in many projects. The second one, and I think this is very attractive for the academic side, because it can promote to change the wastewater treatment plants to water resource recovery facilities. And with this, we also can create new paths for scientific research and also joint research with other countries that have already this kind of technology. Third is the implementation of the innovative financing and business models. And a very good example is, of course, Brazil. And the last one, which is action 4, is work on policies and institutions for the regulation. As you could see from the graph number 1 that I have shown you, it takes a long time. But in our countries, if we introduce this kind of policies, it could work. Therefore, there are key factors for success. We realize that the government support and leadership is very important, but this cannot be alone. It has to go with the stakeholder engagement and compromise. This is because Latin American region has a lot of communities, and as we have different communities, we also could have different conflicts. Therefore, seeking local opportunity and helping communities to understand that the proof of concept that circular economy does work, and we are not only doing research for publishing a paper, but for helping them and create a new technology, then it will be a factor of success. My friend, Brenda Acevedo, will tell you everything now in our native language, in Spanish. Brenda.
Thank you. Gracias por estar todos aquí. Es un placer para mí estar aquí. I am Brenda Acevedo Juárez de la Universidad de Guadalajara. Come on, Ceci, please, the slide. Thank you. En noviembre del 2021 se ha aprobado la Ley de Economía Circular en México. Esta ley promueve que se establezcan acciones en materia de sustentabilidad hídrica desde el gobierno federal hasta el municipal, incluyendo además como clave de acción a la sociedad civil. Actualmente, las acciones que han contribuido a la adopción del modelo circular recaen en el gobierno y en las empresas. Ejemplos son la planta de tratamiento de aguas residuales de Atotonilco, y el agua tratada se reutiliza en riego agrícola de 80,000 hectáreas de maíz y alfalfa. En la empresa Audi, que creó 25,000 pozos ciegos para recargar el acuífero en la localidad de San José Azuma, sustituyendo así la extracción de agua subterránea por el desarrollo de una laguna para la captación de lluvias. México necesita acelerar sin duda el modelo de economía circular, ya que por tercer año consecutivo la sequía abarca el 80% del país. Para resguardar la seguridad hídrica mediante este modelo, es necesario prestar atención al mantenimiento de la planta de tratamiento de aguas residuales, así como cuidar la seguridad de instalaciones y eliminar la corrupción en este sector. Además de que es pertinente que se promueva la economía circular en la sociedad a través de la educación y reflexión del cuidado del agua. Muchas gracias por su atención. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Cecilia and Brenda, and it has been a pleasure working on this together to identify best practices at different countries and how that can be scaled at regional level, and regional scale is of key interest for UNU-CRIS. We will come back to you in the Q&A session. I'd like to call upon my third panelist for this section of today's seminar, Dr. Tamara Avilan. She is an old colleague from UNU, and she is an expert on circular economy in the water and wastewater sector. We have also worked together, and recently, I think, Tamara, you've also been involved in some projects and programs in the Latin American region. Perhaps you can share some insights from your experience.
Yeah, thank you, Nidhi. Thank you for this very kind introduction. I'm a native from Uruguay, so also from those de esos lares, as we would say. I would like to maybe focus rather on the perspective. So I've done research on circular economy issues and wastewater treatment, and I will talk a little bit about those. But one of the things that is really important to my heart is that we as academics, we don't only do research, we also foster the new generation of people that will potentially be part of the solution. We train the civil engineers that will be the ones that will put in place the next wastewater treatment systems and will be designing these and maintaining these or overseeing maintenance. And so part of the question that I've been asking myself is, how can we as higher education trainers train that new generation to understand how to integrate circular economy thinking into these very complex engineering systems. And I do think that's a really important responsibility that we have as higher education professors and docents and so on. And I'm not really sure how good we are at addressing this part so far. I think we've been fairly good at addressing the research parts. And so I'm going to share some of the thinking that has gone through my mind in the last few years when thinking about circular economy and sustainable wastewater. So for me, when I give a lecture on this to my students, I always start with the chicken and egg question. Because for me, sustainable wastewater treatment is critical for achieving SDGs. But then how do we make wastewater treatments sustainable so that we're not with these treatment systems creating new issues for sustainability? And we all know that we can be using some of the resources that come out of wastewater treatment systems to make them more sustainable. But in the research that we have done in Mexico and in Guatemala on two wastewater treatment systems, we realized that when we do sustainability analyses on these systems, that we have very little data on the economic and on the social dimension of sustainability of wastewater treatment systems because we don't focus too much on that. And if we then go into the criteria, into the actual indicators that we're using for those sustainability assessments, very few of those actually relate to circular economy principles in terms of reusing resources or the 6 R's that Cecilia and Brenda and Nidhi had in their very nice paper that you have published. So really maybe rethinking then also how do we integrate indicators and how do we make sure that we're actually monitoring our wastewater treatment systems so that we can make them more circular and hence potentially more sustainable. However, what I always also say is more circularity does not necessarily equate and more sustainability. So we also need to be a bit careful about making those two things equivalent to each other. Other aspects that we've looked at, one of my favorite treatment systems, to be honest, I'm a huge fan, are constructed wetlands. And constructed wetlands are really nice treatment systems that can be used in all sorts of places around this planet. And they can actually be really useful for making a point about circular economy because so many things in constructed wetlands can be reused. And so we've actually done a study because there's been lots of talk in the constructed wetlands community that biomass reuse would be really cool to do, but there wasn't really a lot of information about is that really useful. So we did a meta study a couple of years ago and looked into biomass, and then we did a little bit of a kind of a mind game and looked at, so if we are putting in place a treatment system, constructed wetland for 120 people in sub-Saharan Africa, and we then reuse that biomass that is produced from the constructed wetland, we came up with figures that you can actually save up to 12 hectares of demand for wood fuel because you can use that biomass for creating energy, clean energy through biogas production, and then you don't have to go out into the woods and collect wood fuel for your cooking needs. And there's also some other calculations that we did here, but I really wanted to make that point about the nexus here also between energy, food, and water, that wastewater treatment systems can actually make those connections between these three nexi. And to maybe come to a bit of a conclusion here, I actually think that, and I agree with Cecilia and Brenda about what they said about participation. Participation is really key in any kind of treatment systems that we put out there. Be it big ones, be it small ones, it's obviously even more important if they're small community type treatment systems, because then it's very relevant for the community to be involved and to be knowledgeable about what's happening there. In particular, if we're going to be looking at reuse practices, really knowing about how your treatment system works and what then happens in the irrigation system, for instance, is really critical. And this is one of the recommendations that we gave, for instance, to small treatment system in Tepeji in Mexico, where we said, do work with your public and make sure that you know that your audience knows how your treatment systems work, so that the kids that play in the soccer field that is irrigated with the wastewater treatment systems, so that the parents of these kids feel safe about their kids playing on those fields. And to conclude, one of the tools that we've found in our research to be really useful, both actually for engaging with the communities on site, so locally, but also for teaching purposes, are serious games. And so we've developed a number of different serious games. There's one that we've recently produced on constructed wetlands and how to think about, make decisions about, do I put a wetland in place, or is maybe a different kind of treatment system the better option? Those serious games really give the opportunity for engaging in a discussion and in having an interaction between different stakeholders that otherwise maybe wouldn't be in the same room, or where you wouldn't think about how the position of the other stakeholder might be. And so really to conclude, coming back to my first point, if we as academics, if we don't train the next generation to think in a circular mode from the onset, this change will be even harder to make. Thank you.
Well, that's a lovely words to conclude, Tamara, and I'm glad that you're representing University of Oulu in Finland, and you have also given us an insight of how to bring education and education institutions into the mix of taking this theory to practice. With that, I'll ask my colleague from UNU Japan, Marcin Jaspiski, who's representing UNU-CRIS in Japan, to give us some idea about some best practices in Asia and overall about the topic. Over to you, Marcin.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you, everyone, for joining this seminar and this webinar. And my name is Marcin Jaspiski. I'm from the United Nations University Institute for Advanced Study of Sustainability. And today I would like to talk about how actually sustainable urban water is important for circular society and circular economy, and actually how we could approach it and how we could measure for future better progress towards avoiding degrading water quality, and actually using more better environmental practices in order to achieve sustainable development goals without degrading water quality. And I'll be talking today on behalf of our team that we work at United Nations University, which is also Dr. Jane Pu and Dr. Kensuke Fukushi. So speaking of that, as you, of course, know that water plays a very significant role through transformation of urban, food, energy, and other socioeconomic systems with improved urban water quality and quantity. And we will enhance green infrastructure, aquatic ecosystem conservation, groundwater recharge, contribute to the mitigating urban heat island effect and natural disasters, etc. So we need the water, and we need a good quality and good amount of water in the urban settings. So water is indeed a vital, of course, economic for all economic sectors and human activities, and it's of course an essential source for life on our planet. And the availability and quality of water can significantly impact, of course, our economic development and human health and environment, which I'm a bit repeating, but this is actually the key point that we talked during this session. So water and addressing especially SDG 6 with its targets is of course essential to support our progress across multiple SDGs and promote sustainable development. And of course, by addressing SDG 6, we can ensure that water resources are managed sustainably and used in a way that supports economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And this can help to improve public health and reduce poverty, promote gender equality, and support economic development while protecting natural environment. And for example, SDG 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, access to water and sanitation, of course, is essential for urban areas to function effectively and to support economic growth. And sustainable water, of course, sustainable water management practices can also help cities to adapt to climate change and reduce the risk of water-related disasters. So let's look at the example. For instance, imagine this is Tokyo in 1970s, and where rivers were tremendously polluted with also a solid waste and dissolved waste. And in another example is another river in Tokyo as well around the same time, at Tama River, where we had actually a lot of detergent and causing a foamy pollution across all the rivers. But look now, in these days, we have a very pleasant views, very good landscape serving for our society with different ecosystem services. But then So while so many cities have experienced water quality degradation in the past, such as I was giving the example of Tokyo in 1970s, along with other Japanese cities, future economic growth and urbanization may not necessarily need to repeat the same patterns if we take into consideration a wider range of socioeconomic factors. And past initiatives proved that we could accelerate water quality improvement. So example of Japan shows that socioeconomic changes, environmental policy in place with good implementation did improve the water quality, but there is of course no such a clear answer how actually the success could be achieved. And yet in many other countries, developing countries, much remains to be done, especially in continuing to extend access to improve sanitation and safe drinking water. But with the right approach, especially with our current knowledge, technologies, experiences, we could already actually avoid a lot of sort of this pollution and environmental degradation, and make sort of like, if you could see on this right side hand graph, we could actually make a sort of a leapfrog jump, that's jump in the development progress with less environmental burden. So to conclude, so we are actually working in our team on developing a sort of a comprehensive indicator system that could be utilized to measure the progress of the water quality improvements towards water sustainable practices and SDGs for circular society. And such index system could be a quite actually practical tool for policymakers and stakeholders to track progress towards water sustainability goals, identify areas where some improvement should be done, and make more informed decisions regarding water management practices. And in conclusion, actually, it could help work towards more circular society, more circular economy society. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much for your time and listening.
Thank you so much, Marcin. I think this case study from Japan gives us hope that restoration is possible, and with the concrete effort, we can achieve transition that we aim to. And this is a good segue for us to hear some opinions from practitioners and policy representatives we have in segment 2 of our seminar. I'll put on spotlight Ms. Maria Eugenia D. Leopina, Senior Specialist of Water Circular Economy from Inter-American Development Bank. Over to you, Maria.
Hi, everyone. Good morning here from Panama. Well, I wanted to highlight some aspects that I find critical when talking about circular economy in the water sector, and is that circular economy does not refer only to wastewater reuse, no? So somehow, like the SDGs stress very well how we should incentivize or promote or reduce or increment wastewater recycling in the world. However, there are other elements that we should take into consideration. No? So we should also work in wastewater reduction through wastewater consumption reduction. No, we should also talk about efficient use of water within the water systems. And we should also talk about recycling and reuse, but also about using more close to nature solutions in order to incorporate them in wastewater treatment. No? So somehow I think it's important to highlight that for that we have to really change the paradigm on how we are working in the water and sanitation sector. No? And also it's important to highlight that this has a relation also with other sectors. No, this has to be also to do with energy, no, to the energy sector, with the agriculture. No, if we want agriculture to reuse water, if we are talking about nutrients that want to be reused. With the industry, no, that could be one of the clients of wastewater reuse, and with waste management, no, when we also talk about treatment or co-treatment of sludge, etc. No, so just to have this in mind when approaching circular economy. And now I'm going to talk specifically on Latin America, no, and the challenges that we have encountered when trying to work or to approach how circular economy can be incorporated. No, of course, there is a lot of opportunity to incorporate circular economy. No, when we consider that 40% of the population of Latin America and the Caribbean are located in areas under stress. No, so there is clearly an opportunity to substitute first use water by using treated wastewater. There's also still a lot of high demand of water for agriculture, no? So 60–70% of water is used for agriculture. So it's an important or high demand water user. However, what we have identified is that there are several challenges that we have to consider when developing initiatives on this topic, no? And it is that in the region, we still have very low levels of wastewater treatment, no? So if you want to reuse water, you have to treat. And if we only treat 40% of wastewater, and this varies between countries where we have countries that only treat 5%. So this is a big challenge. Also, we have identified that in many cases, we are talking about on-site sanitation solutions, no? which encounter other different challenges when you talk about reuse. Many of these are in peri-urban areas or in informal areas. And also there are many countries in the region that have high rural population still, no? Many countries like Bolivia or Haiti like have 50%, 40% of rural population that we have also to see how we approach this. Another challenge that we have seen is that there is very low measuring on water volumes, wastewater volumes, and also on the quality. No? So when you want to talk about reuse, no, it will be difficult if we are not sure of the quality of the wastewater that we are generating. And we also see very low levels of control of the wastewater that is discharged into the sewage systems. No, there is no way to make industries like comply on discharging the sewage. So this has become a big challenge. And also water tariffs are very low. So when you want to compete with these low water tariffs, it's really challenging, no? Because you have to incorporate all the costs of treatment and reuse and propellants, etc., to wastewater reuse. And also another aspect I want to address is like the difference in context. No, sometimes in many countries, like distance to reduce water consumers is very far. No, so this presents a challenge in terms of the infrastructure. No, and of course these are like associated with a governance challenge of no clear planning. No, I think already was highlighted. Very interesting, like all this process and how most of the countries in Latin America, we have already this concept of circular economy in waste, but not in water. No, so we have only a couple of countries that have really approached this at the planning or strategic level. But also when you come into standards, we have also seen that there are not many standards or clear standards that could give you a safe environment to approach a reuse program. No, we have identified that from 26 countries in the region, only 16 have some standards related to water reuse, and only 12 have a standard related to biosolids or sludge reuse. No, So when you don't have the certainty and you want also private sector to come and invest in reuse or circular economy, there's a big challenge, no? So just like to close this first intervention, no? So we see there's an opportunity to circular economy in the region. We have identified very interesting experiences of wastewater utilities already working in the topic, very successful projects where we have sustainable projects in the financial way with private sector participation or public sector participation as well. So there is this opportunity. So I really think what we need is to work in this, in enabling the environment to accelerate the incorporation of circular economy in the water sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, for giving us a summary of challenges that IADB is taking note of to channel financing to support technology transfer. With that, let's shift on to the Brazilian Institute for Development and Sustainability, Brazil, where Mr. Eric Sawyer, the president of the Deliberative Council, will provide his insights about circular economy in the water sector in Brazil and in the region in general. Thank you. And over to you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. Thank you to all the co-organizers and fellow speakers for this opportunity to speak in this very important and relevant event. I hope you can all see my presentation, my screen. And today I'm going to be speaking about part of Brazil. I'd actually like to take you on a 10-second vacation to the northeastern part of Brazil, in the state of Alagoas, and more specifically the capital of the state of Alagoas, which is Maceió. Maceió has unparalleled natural beauties. You can see the ocean rivals the Caribbean, and tourism is a very important factor for the people who live there, as you can see in these pictures. But less than 1 kilometer away from all this natural beauty, we find a very different reality. We find a community that lives on the shores of a very large lagoon. And 1,500 of these families, upwards of 1,500 of these families, have a very intimate relationship with the water from this lagoon, because that is where they extract the sururu, which is a smaller mussel clam. The scientific name is Mitella charuana. And they extract tons of these mussels every day, generating up to 5 tons of waste that's usually left openly on the streets, as you see in this picture, causing a big environmental problem, both for the local population and for the local government. It's a very wicked problem, very complex situation that has no easy solutions. But we at IABS, the Brazilian Institute of Development and Sustainability, took on the challenge of finding a solution that would include the social aspect of circular economy for this population, finding a use for these 5 tons of seashells that are discarded every day on the streets. So the first thing we did was to start a study that would try to identify what possible uses there could be for these shells. And we found that they are rich in calcium carbonate, meaning that they could be used in a wide variety of industries, including agriculture, plastic, ceramic, paper, cellulose, a whole bunch of them. But in most cases, what they would substitute are materials that are very low in added value. And this wouldn't generate the social impact that we desired with the project. And so we looked for a famous architect and designer in Brazil who made this hollow brick. The hollow part reminds us of the shape of the shell. And we started manufacturing this these hollow bricks with a mixture of cement and the seashells. This was very interesting, and the local, very large local company decided to adopt this into their business model. And currently, these bricks are sold all over Brazil. This was a solution that we found was very useful because it added value. It really generated the income for the families that we wanted to work with. But it also required other solutions. As soon as the company that's selling these hollow bricks told us, well, we need a company to buy this from. So we started a social enterprise. We saw that it wouldn't be very appropriate to try to change the very livelihoods that we were trying to preserve and try to develop an entrepreneurial spirit that wasn't present at the time in the community. So what we decided to do was start a social enterprise that would buy the seashells from the women who are usually in charge of these shells and sell them the bricks to the company. We employ all the people from the local community who are trained in the manufacture of these hollow bricks. And 100% of the profits, once we reach this stage, of course, we haven't yet been able to reach the break-even point, but we are about to. And 100% of the profit, once all the costs are covered, will go back to the community in a fund that will support projects that are for and by the community itself. We also created a local currency, which is what is used to pay for the shells that these women bring to our manufacturing facility. This local currency helps to support the local businesses and makes sure that all the benefits that are generated are local and stay in the local area for the neighborhood that we want to work with. And lastly, we also developed a sururu farming technique, which is not innovative in itself, but considering the situations that these fishers usually have to dive up to 3 meters without any equipment to the bottom of the lagoon where they take the sururu from the mud. This really reduces the stress. And to our surprise, this was also something that knocked down a gender barrier, meaning that more women and young adults could participate in this stage of the value chain, which is something they couldn't do before. So this is just a summary of everything I said, all the solutions that we gave rise to based on the original solution of the hollow brick, considering all the purchase of the shells from the local women, the processing, the fund, and then generation of new products, including some others. We called this social innovation ecosystem in what we call the social circular economy, because our main concern, in addition to the environmental aspect, was to really generate income for the local population who is in such dire situation of social vulnerability. These are some of the awards that we have been graced with, including a design award for the hollow brick itself, including an innovation in aquaculture award for the sururu farming that we started, and also a very important award in Brazil as a social technology for the ecosystem as a whole. So this is just in a nutshell the idea of our project, and I'll be available for any other questions next. And also I leave here my email address for any other questions that may remain after that.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. We'll bring you back to the Q&A part. And with this, let's shift our attention to Uruguay. We have been supported by Manuel Albadego, lead of UNIDO, Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay. So UNIDO has been in discussion with us while preparing this session. And today they are represented by Juan Pablo Albornoz he's representing Partnership for Action on Green Economy page Uruguay. So Juan, please take the stage and share your insights on behalf of UNEDO and Page.
Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Pablo Albornoz. Morning. I'm here representing of Manuel Albaladejo. At first, I want to say sorry because he couldn't stay today. In terms of circular economy in water, I have some projects working in the office. For example, one of them is the PAGE program, is the Partnership for Action on Green Economy. And I think that the most important line of work in terms of circular economy in water is the National Strategy in Circular Economy that we are creating and designing with 3 ministers here in Uruguay. One of them is the Ministry of Industry, also the Ministry of Agriculture, and also the Ministry of Environment. The 3 parts are created national strategy of green economy. That the strategy has 5 areas. One of them is soil, materials, renewable energy, waste management, and also one of the important area is water. So the strategy is designed the line of actions for this topic. For example, collecting more information and the industry. For example, here in the food sector, that is the most important sector in Uruguay, for example, for meat, for dairy, and also deforestation. Okay, so the final document will be maybe in the next few months. I will be happy to share with all of you.
Thank you, Johan. So we really heard a very interesting intervention so far in this segment, right from taking idea to enterprise to national strategy in the making for Uruguay that may influence interventions and similar strategy documentation in other countries in the region. Now let's shift our attention to hearing some of the innovation perspective from Dr. Carlo Pietro Belli, UNESCO Chair in Science and Technology and Innovation Policies for Sustainable Development in Latin America. Professor is also associated with UNU-MERIT in the Netherlands. So over to you, Carlo. We are looking to hear your insights.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you, organizers from the different institutions. I'm actually holding this UNESCO chair on sustainable, on science, technology, innovation policies for sustainable development at UNU-MERIT in Maastricht, one of the institutes of the United Nations University. And I'm here to share with you a couple of thoughts, a couple of ideas that I would like to be centered on the role that firms and businesses can play in the circular economy. We've been hearing a number of different positions and ideas on the role of civil society as well as governments and the technical and scientific aspects of the circular economy and how this is related to water and water management. What I would like to say and remind ourselves is that the circular economy can offer remarkable business opportunities, and the business sector is an actor that needs to be considered in all our thoughts and all our thinking about public policies for the circular economy and water management. Our friends from UNIDO reminded us of the economic role that the circular economy can play in today's economy in terms of faster growth, of employment creation, in terms of enhanced resilience, as well as sustainability and the creation of sustainable and greener, so to speak, jobs. And of course, although the business sector plays a central role in all this process, the business sector needs to be governed. There are remarkable examples from a productive sector I've been studying recently. That is the extractive and mining sector in Latin America, where we've been leading a number of projects, a number of studies on the mining sector and the potential the mining sector can offer Latin American countries. And one of the things that we found out is that the mining sector is very intensive in the use of water, and that on the Andes, a single mine in one day can use as much water as a city of 30,000 people would use, which is an amazing quantity of water, which forces mining companies to look after this problem and put in place ways to remedy and ways to better manage the water. And luckily, in several countries, regulations and policies exist to force mining companies to look after the correct use and management of water and put in place establishment for cleaning water and using water in a circular way to allow cities and the local communities to have their water as well as the water that is needed to extract the minerals. So there's a great role for business as well as government that needs to govern and needs to ensure the correct governance of all this. And one thing I would like to remind us is that a lot of business activities in the world nowadays are organized along what is known as value chains or global value chains, which are essentially sequences of activities developed in different parts of the world and organized and managed and governed by lead firms or lead buyers that manage to organize the activities of many others. Value chains are prevailing in natural resource intensive sectors as well. And they also operate in water and water related activities. And not only to use water for productive uses, but also, as I mentioned before, for the mining sector, they're increasingly engaged in the management of water for the productive purposes. And in that regard, there's been a lot of discussion on the extent with which global value chains are going to continue in these years of rising protectionism and uncertainty and the war in Europe and the COVID and the geopolitical tensions that exist all around. So this, the big question that we all have is to what extent globalization is going to continue. And the jargon that is being used is instead of the outsourcing, that is the sourcing from out of the firm and managing and buying from other companies in other countries, the jargon has included increasingly contemplates words such as backsourcing or sourcing back somewhere near where main establishments are located, or French sourcing that is buying from friendly countries or countries nearby, or near sourcing, relocating activities following a logic somehow, and the logic that seems to be increasingly related to protectionism and geopolitical tensions and so on. But in this regard, there's this one additional source of hope for our topic, for our discussion on water management and the circular economy. That is that in this process of relocating activities and eventually backsourcing or French sourcing and so on, there's one kind of approach that is being increasingly followed that is beginning to be named power sourcing or sort of green sourcing. That is sourcing and buying intermediate goods and natural resources from countries that are capable of using sustainable technologies to produce intermediate goods and natural resources. So we increasingly hear talking about green mining and countries that are equipping themselves with the appropriate technologies to produce mining in a sustainable fashion, which would have an implication for water management and which could imply that the mode of organization of global value chains could incorporate more sustainable ways of managing production worldwide. So in a nutshell, I think that whenever we talk about water management and the circular economy, I think we need to understand what is the logic of the business sector, how to engage the business sector in this, and the potential the business sector can play, but lead the business sector and regulate it and direct the business sector and coordinate activities between the public and the private sector and establish appropriate standards and appropriate regulations that would make it possible to ensure that the business development follows a way and a direction that is compatible with a more sustainable management of water and management of natural resources. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlo. Very, very interesting and rich thoughts coming to this discourse. And I think it's a good segment to bring now a sort of a good bridge to bring the private sector voice today. We are glad to have two representatives from the private sector to share their insights, how they are working with academia, with think tanks, with regulatory authorities to see that some of the innovations that they're developing or steering flows well and at the ground level, at the intervention level. So maybe I'll ask first Lucy Gwen-Gilles from International Marine and Dredging Consultants of Belgium to give her insights into this discussion.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'll just share my presentation. Sorry, I'm struggling. So thank you very much for inviting me onto this panel. It's really interesting to be able to exchange different views. And I've already booked notes and people to further develop conversations with and some of the developments that they're doing. So one of the main innovating strategies that IMDC has actually, so we're a water company, but we both work with offshore and also inland simultaneously as well. And one of the innovative strategies we've been developing is really trying to develop these sustainability tools. So really trying to assess projects for their sustainability. And one of the problems that we found with our clients is that they struggle to understand what their impacts are on the environment. They're aware that they need to know what their impacts are. They're aware that future legislation is going to be pushing them to be aware of their impacts and to how they can positively contribute to the environment. But there's this disconnect between what they want to go towards and, you know, information coming from academia, coming from us, coming from NGOs, bringing it to the table so that they can understand it. So that's something that IMDC really works towards. So one of the things we're developing with funding from the Belgian government is the Marine Ecosystem Performance Framework. And basically this framework assesses both the positive and negative impacts of projects on the environment. We've used a case study of wind farm development. So wind farm development is very important at the moment in Belgium. It's something that they're doing with lots of cumulative impacts, and it can be both inland and offshore, but we're working on offshore at the moment. And we've been looking at how we can assess these impacts on the environment, and also on cascades for ecosystem services simultaneously as well. So really looking at how they impact on ecosystem services. And this kind of, especially for wind farm, kind of brings it back because they're kind of producing green energy as well at the same time, right? So it comes back into different ecosystem services in different ways. We look at the negative impact. So this is from the project implementation, so the construction of the project right up to decommissioning. And what's really important for us is we also look at positive measures as well. So we looked at how, if they use nature inclusive design, how this will change and how this will have also a different impact as well. And it's really important for businesses to understand how they can do good to the environment, right? You know, it's very easy to say, don't do this, don't do that, and stop doing that. But it's really important to say, you know, these recommendations, this is what you can do that can really, you know, change it and like switch that communication with them. And basically the MEST framework at the moment, we developed into a demonstration tool, and this will give them a score. And this score can be improved by using positive measures. So we have lots of recommendations they can do. And these can be done from like the very basic recommendations, like for boats to disinfect the ballast water, to like really extensive recommendations, which is restoring a whole ecosystem. And these all can feed back into the tool and give them a different rating. We also looked at the tool in setting different targets. So basically, we have different business applications. One of them being, the first one is really just like, if you just want to, your project, you want to go towards the minimum legal requirements that you need to do, right up to you want to be a front runner of like nature inclusive design with positive measures. And we also recommend how these companies can really monitor their impacts, their positive and negative impacts at the same time as well. So really what they need to do to monitor. Because we had, this project has been running for 15 months. We're very proud of our demonstration tool, and actually next week we will be presenting it to all the people that were invited to our workshops, and is open so anyone else can attend as well. But we will, we've had a series of workshops, both with academia, so of the universities in Belgium, with other organizations that develop sustainability tool, and importantly with businesses, because this tool needs to be used by businesses to work, right? So we've really developed very much a business perspective on this. We've had a case study that's offshore wind farms, but we actually want to go towards aquaculture. That's our next case study we want to develop in the second stage of the project. And we've had a workshop pretty much every month to really include the feedback from academia, because there's a lot of information there of measuring these impacts and these positive measures, but it's not really being fed back to business as well. So this is like we're developing that link. This is not the only tool that we have at AMDC. I'm presenting it today because I think it's the one most appropriate, but we also have like a carbon assessment tool as well, which again tries to bring all this information that's been generated and bring it back into a tool that businesses can understand, and then they can start develop with at the same time. So I would like to share that we will be presenting next week the MES tool. If anyone's interested in attending, I will share the link for it.
Thank you, Lucy. This is very interesting to get an insight of what is being developed to then bridge these gaps. With that, I will now request my colleague Sane Okamoto to show us the video message from the other private sector voice, Mr. Joy Weng Chen, the president of Ding Tai company in Taiwan, who are developing a suite of eco-solutions to handle water crisis, to handle soil restoration, ecosystem restoration, attending to the agenda of climate change through sponge city mechanisms and modalities. So let's see some message from them, and we have our colleagues on the screen to then give us some more detailed insight if the need be.
Okay, do you see the screen from our colleague from Taiwan? Okay. Just let me know if you don't hear the sound. I just start to play now. Thank you.
尊敬的主办单位，各位贵宾，很荣幸能参与本次会议，非常感谢主办单位联合国大学比较区域一体化研究院及主持人纳卡巴特拉女士的邀请， 我是品代股份有限公司董事长陈瑞文，街道生态工法发明人。本次联合国2023年水事会议定调极力寻求破局者的解决方案，因此本公司自觉负有责任，向大家介绍街道生态工法。它目前被证明是最永续又对环境没有副作用，革新传统的水资源管理系统，从根本上解决水太多、水太少、水太脏的问题。街道生态工法颠覆传统城市基础建设的做法，如土木、水利等领域的思维。街道生态工法打开封闭地表，让空气自主循环与地表的上与下之间，使雨水就地吸收，净化空气及水质，补碳及解决热岛效应，帮助城市解决目前的环境三大灾害，从而让水快速进入地下，进行储存及净化，以便再利用，就地循环，可连续无限的循环再利用。这种全新的水资源管理系统，彻底颠覆改变了我们以往的传统排水优先、污水外排的方式，实现真正的永续发展。街道生态工法是基于联合国永续发展目标 SDGs 和环境、社会和治理 ESG 框架所设计的，可达成15项永续发展目标，且辅助达成其余2项。我们正在推动气候韧性基础建设，并寻求合作伙伴，其能借此在地化、教育备利，可改善当地环境，达成绿色经济发展，同时实现永续发展目标。希望未来能与大家合作，为地球带来贡献。今天我们因为联合国2023年水事会议齐聚一堂，目的就是为了寻求解决方案。只有借由创新又没有副作用的永续性解决方案，才能够解决当前的环境问题和水资源短缺的问题。本次会议的主题是循环经济，街道生态工法能够实现水、空气、热、污染物，也就是4大自然元素的就地循环，同时推动基础建设和促进绿色经济发展，从而真正实现循环经济。本人诚心的邀请大家一起合作，透过街道生态工法，深信我们可以促进水等自然资源的永续利用，确保为我们的子孙后代保留这些重要资源，同时提供未来安全的永续发展。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Sunny, and thank you, Mr. Chen, for sending us this message, an invitation to work with the private sector. We look forward to then making that bridge to learn from your experience in these technologies, how they can be scaled, can be applied to context-specific settings. And I think this is the end of the interventions, specific interventions from our esteemed panel this afternoon. Now we do have some time, fortunately, for an interactive discussion. And my colleague, Dr. Okamoto, has given us some open and some points to discuss some of the questions that we outlined and shared with you in advance. Maybe I will try to summarize these questions in the 3 sections we had: the academic voice, the practitioners and the policy voice, and the private sector voice. So maybe I will start with the private sector voice in this order before. Maybe putting you in the spotlight, Lucy, would you like to share what are the challenges and opportunities to working with academia, with policymakers, because you sit in the middle of the spectrum in taking these ideas to implementation?
Yes, it's a very good question. I feel like so I actually come from academia. So I came from academia when I moved to IMDC.
So I've worked in both, but I also, before as an academia, worked at an NGO. So I've really bridged all the gaps. And I sometimes get the impression that businesses can be intimidated a little bit by academia. And additionally, there is so much information coming out, but it's just not getting to the right people. And there is this really poor communication gap. And I don't have any easy answers how to answer this. But there is this, like, there's so many, I don't know if it's the journals that we publish in academia that we're always pushing to publish more, but they're just not readable for businesses to understand and to bring into how they can develop further with it. And I think this is like primarily really a communication issue.
Thanks. I think communication is a keyword that we take home with us to have more modalities of better communication between different stakeholders. Coming out to my next set of panelists from practitioners and policy voice, I'd like to put you on the spotlight, Maria, first, to understand how IADB is taking note of the gaps in circular economy integration in the water sector. Do you have any plans for funding more projects and programs so as to elevate capacity and help in scaling innovations that some countries or regions are already demonstrating?
Yeah. So as IDB, we're really clear that if we want to tackle the SDGs, we have to incorporate these new approaches. So that's why we are working a lot in circular economy and seeing how we can support the efforts that the countries are already carrying out. And specifically, we have been helping the countries in working in standards. No, we have been analyzing different standards in different countries that could be to highlight which are the recommendations for the countries to develop an adequate set of standards for wastewater reuse, for example. We have also tried to disseminate case studies that are successful case studies. We have published a technical note that maybe I can share on the chat on 10 case studies on wastewater reuse in the region to highlight which are the key success factors for these case studies as well. And we will be working this year also in collaboration with OCDE in continuing this assessment on which are the factors that the 10 countries in the Latin America region should work on to increase like their capabilities to work in circular economy. Now, this means not only in standards, in laws, but also in their technical capabilities, as you mentioned, that is key. Even in bidding processes that really can be open to incorporate technologies that have this perspective. How can we incorporate how good countries are doing in monitoring, etc. So this work, we think we will give also a lot of information and a clear pathway on how countries can continue approaching this topic.
Thank you, Maria. My colleague Sane has a question for Eric. Go ahead, Sane.
Hi, thank you very much. Eric, I have a very practical element type of questions. I'm a behavioral scientist. I'm working now the plastic recycling project together with the local communities and under the European Horizon Green Deal program. And we have been facing quite some challenges to, how to engage local populations. And from the beautiful talk, I learned there are so many local actors are involved, like women and citizens, and also even local commerce. And this is really like you need to activate local ecosystem from the bottom. And then I'm just wondering also that related to Tamara's point, like to make mindset of the local population, how to make participation from the community and the citizens. So this is like, very, interesting case. And I have a question, two questions actually. How do you motivate the people in the local community? And also how do you motivate the people to keep doing the same things and even like accelerate the activities they have been doing? And second one is, again, come back to Tamara's point to educate, and train the youth population. So do you have a particular like education or training program at your institute to offer like younger generation to make their mindset more like a circular economy oriented the angle? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, Sana. Indeed, it's a very complicated challenge. Like I said, it's a wicked problem that requires the cooperation of all sectors and all institutions in order to be successful. And this includes, of course, the beneficiaries who are there. If they don't believe in the solution that you are proposing, they won't adopt this. Our strategy from the start was not to spend too much time trying to convince people that this would be important and the environmental benefits, but mostly on how this could improve their quality of life, not only from removing something that was a problem on the streets, creating a series of health-related issues for the children who were playing in these piles of seashells, but also economically. It's much easier to convince someone once you're paying them for something that they would usually just discard on the streets than it is to try to convince them of the environmental benefit of what's being brought forward. So I didn't mention some of our results. We're coming up quickly on 100 tons of seashells removed from the streets of the neighborhood. And we've generated approximately 200,000 reais, which in current exchange rates would be about $40,000 of economic benefits, both from direct employment in the manufacturing facility and payments to the women who bring the seashells. Doesn't seem like much, but if you consider that for some of these women, we're matching the income they have from the traditional activities, this can have a large impact. We're not trying to make anybody rich, of course, but really just to give them a little better quality of life. So this has helped a lot. Sorry, I forgot the second question.
The second one was, how do you have like education or training program to educate or like train youth population to circular economy related mindset?
Yes, we don't have a program yet, but our goal is to have this fund that will receive not only the profits from the operation itself, but from other donors who might be interested, and to have projects that will support this type of educational activity, including local partners. There's a local NGO who's responsible for the currency and also for mobilization, and they are very active in these educational aspects. So we are hoping that once this fund gets going, we can have a lot of educational activities for the youth there.
That's amazing.
Thank you, Eric. I think we are getting two keywords, communication and more focus on capacity. With that capacity word is a good segue for me to get additional perspective from our academic group. Maybe putting you on spotlight, Tamara, as you were mentioned a couple of times. Are you a part of some of these educational programs already in Europe or in the Latin American region where some of these scientific developments are being converted into education curriculum or similar?
Yeah, so maybe answering Sana's question about how to keep stakeholders engaged and how to get them involved. One of the very interesting things that we've been seeing in water, energy, food nexus projects is that it's very hard to get the energy sector to the table because mostly we're working in transboundary watersheds, and then the energy sector, often with hydropower plants, is commonly or feels commonly as the bad guy, and also is very powerful. And so what we've seen is that if you work towards the interest of those stakeholders, then you can turn the tables around. So what we've been doing is, if you help the hydropower energy sector to better understand how they can optimize their energy production, then that is a larger incentive. It's similar to what Eric said. It's a larger incentive than if you tell them, well, you need to maintain the ecological low flows. Yeah? So it's if you provide them with an incentive with the carrot rather than the stick, you obviously incentivize them to come to the table more willingly, potentially. But we still see that as a really large challenge in the water, energy, food nexus context. To answer your question, Nidhi, and also Sana's question about educational programs, I would say it's really very much at the beginning. So I've been starting to have conversations with other colleagues in other universities in Europe to think about how can we set up new curricula that focus more strongly on sustainability, that focus more strongly on circular economy. At the University of Oulu, we do have a very strong program on circular economy, also with regard to the mining that Carlo mentioned earlier. Northern Finland produces a lot of different natural resources that are mined and that require a lot of water and a lot of produce a lot of environmental damage. So there's a lot of research that is going into making that sector also more sustainable in Europe. And in Latin America, I haven't seen it that much, but I haven't been involved too much in the academic curricula making in Latin America, so I can't really comment on that. But yeah, I would say it's in the beginning stages, yeah, with hopeful future outlooks.
Thanks. Well, maybe let's hear from Professor Cecilia Soto, and she's been developing a curriculum and pitching it at different levels to get it endorsed. And as UNU, we're helping her. So why don't you share some insights on what kind of barriers or support systems are available to get this knowledge from particular sector to the education sector?
Thank you so much. Well, it's been like 3 years that circular economy has been as a program in a course in Bolivia, in Mayor de San Andres University, in the graduate school. However, it was mainly focused only on waste, as Professor Tamara said before. Unfortunately, this year we have the master course, and we decided to focus also on wastewater, and UNU-CRIS will be helping us to conquer this goal. And we started also with a project, which is a research project that involves the communities. As we have finished the project for research, we don't want to stop there, as we have already changed some paradigm in the communities, and they want us to continue working with them. Therefore, we decided to put this master program alongside with the community, and we'll be teaching them as part of the academic professionals will be teaching them, but we also need to tell the community that they have to continue, although we are not going to be with them all the time. In that sense, it's going to be difficult, I know, but we are starting this year, and if anybody would like to be part of our professors in the master course, we'll be very happy to have you with us.
Thank you, Cecilia. And before now we have almost reached to the tail end of our session, and I am once again requesting my director, Dr. Philippe de Lombaerde, to give us some closing words, to give us some direction after this discussion.
Thank you very much. Well, I will obviously not try to summarize what has been said. It was a very rich discussion. Let me perhaps just highlight again the crucial role of governance in all this, and also to the challenge to think of technical solutions, business solutions, and governance aspects at the same time. I think that is really crucial here. Now, when I say governance, that of course covers a number of things. It starts with new collaborations, new forms of interaction in the non-government sector. It's when we talk about the circular economy and transition towards a more circular economy, we are talking about managing new flows, material flows, energy flows, flows of, water-related flows. So this has to be managed. It implies new relationships between economic actors, producers, but also consumers, users. When I say governance, it also refers to public-private partnerships. It refers to broader platforms, multi-stakeholder platforms, which are more flexible and open and relevant contexts to discuss these new solutions and innovations. When I say governance, it also refers to new collaborations, new forms of coordination within the governmental sector. For example, if you think of a new solution in a municipality X, it is well possible that the success of that innovation depends on what happens in municipality Y, in the neighboring municipality, whether policies, practices go in the same direction or not. So it also refers to vertical coordination between the local level, the subnational level, the national level. Are policies moving in the same direction or not? So the type of policy or the type of intervention that is proposed is as important as the level of governance that you're looking at it. Finally, also international cross-border governance aspects are important because often water resources are indeed cross-border. They do not stop at the borders. Think of rivers, think of river basins. So there we also need this coordination, this cooperation cross-border. This international region, like in the case of Latin America, can also be an adequate context or level to exchange best practices, or at least good practices. So you need some kind of level there that allows that interaction, that communication. Finally, when you think of regulations, also there is an issue of, okay, what is the optimal level of regulation? Is it local? Is it subnational, national, or is it regional? I mean, at the supranational level. So international cooperation can be necessary or can be adequate to find that optimal level of regulation. Okay, I think I will stop here. I see that it's already 5 p.m., at least our time. So I will finish here, but not without, of course, thanking all the contributors of today for their very interesting contributions from their different backgrounds, disciplinary and geographical backgrounds. We are very much looking forward to further engaging with you in the future. And of course, you can always call upon United Nations University as a partner for new projects, research projects or training and so on. So thanks again and muchas gracias.
Yeah, and we don't want to hold you more than we should. Maybe I'll ask my colleague Sane to just in 1 minute show us what next, because the conversation has just begun and we like to take it forward.
Thank you, Nidhi. At last, a quick note from our end. We have planned the next steps, especially for the upcoming months, these 3 items. First one is water action agenda for UN water. And then we would like to develop a regional integration assessment for circular economy in water in the Latin American region. And also we would like to make a policy brief publication from this session. And there will be more coming up during this water action decade. And we will follow up with you soon.
Thank you, Sane. And in the context of time, again, I would like to re-emphasize the contribution, the commitment, and the time for all the parties on the screen. And we like to finish on time, so you can have your nice cup of coffee. Thanks once again for joining us. The session is now closed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.